Wholeness and welcome. This is Josh Dippold from Integrating Presence. And this talk is mostly going to be about the psychology of customer service apologies. We've all been in situations where we're calling customer support or we're on the phone or we're speaking to someone in person too. And it gets to the point where they say, well, I apologize for such and such. I'm sorry. Or not really sorry. It's just, well, I apologize for that. So for me, that was kind of like it didn't really sit well all of a sudden. For most part, it does. It just there's something about it. So I was wondering what that was all about. Like, what's going on here? Why do I like feel this way? Or kind of throws up a red flag, but I didn't really know what was going on. So I sat down and I investigated this, kind of looked more deeply into it. Now, this is obviously my own opinion, my own insights, my own view on this, my own thoughts based on my feeling and experience. So obviously, I'm not saying this is the truth or this is the way it is for everybody all the time. But this is kind of what I've arrived at, some of these short insights here. And I'm not talking about sincere apologies amongst friends, not at all, because we all know the power of a sincere apology and when it's impactful and needed, and then sometimes when it's being withheld and then finally given. I'm not talking about that. And I'm not saying don't do this either. I'm not saying that if you work in customer service, that you should just stop apologizing altogether. Not saying that either necessarily. But to start this off, with customer service representatives apologizing. It's first off, it's based on a perceived issue, which a lot of times the other person addressing something they perceive an issue and it's pretty clear. But sometimes I know in my experience, I'm just reporting certain things and I don't look at it as a problem or an issue, even anything that needs to be fixed. I just kind of like, oh, this is my observation. You can do with this observation what you want. You don't have to do anything with it at all. But for the most part, from what I gather, when somebody apologizes in customer service, there's an issue. They're perceiving an issue. They think there's something wrong. And this is almost like a reflexive push button surface level reaction, right? It's almost scripted. I'm sure there's some customer service reps that do this countless times a day. And I've even had ones that just, over and over again apologize. So there's not really much thought or feeling. It's just kind of like a routine scripted thing. It's really on the surface level. It makes sense because to one extent for them to do it because it distanced one emotionally. I mean, I couldn't even imagine being a customer service representative and having people call and complain and probably be irate, maybe take out a lot of stuff on them too. I get it if they can just automatically say, I'm sorry, or I apologize for that. Even if it's just kind of just a canned response, it will distance them emotionally from the other person so they don't have to take on their crap. So I get that. It's also a psychological tactic of gauging an emotional response to an apology. So once the person says, I apologize, well, then it kind of, on the upside, forces a moment of mindfulness for the other person. And then the customer service representatives can kind of gauge what their emotional response is once that apology comes. If it changes, then they can go from there. Like if it helps, then they can diffuse the situation, or if it does something else, then they can kind of see a different side or a different kind of emotional response once that's there or not. So it's kind of throws a fork in the road, perhaps. So once that happens, once they get kind of a gauge on how the person responds to the apology, then they're going to get some kind of knowledge there about the person's kind of emotional intelligence and the situation. Probably get a brief change a lot of times. And then, so how is that knowledge used? How is the customer service representative going to use that knowledge once they apologize? How the other person changes or responds? Are they going to use it to get the upper hand emotionally on the person calling in or talking or wanting help or service or reporting something? And then if they are going to try to get the upper hand emotionally, how do they do that? Now, on the kind of the really dark side of this, it can be kind of an inverted apologizing like this can a cover, an inverted cover, Schadenfreude for some. And this word Schadenfreude is a German word for deriving joy and satisfaction from the pain and suffering and things going wrong for others. And so if they're actually feeling that, they can kind of mask that or cover that by giving a shallow apology. Now, hopefully, none of you will ever have to experience that, but it's a thing and it's out there. And which brings me to my next point. I've had a teacher of mine put this way, and it just fascinates me. Why do some people say one thing but mean another, and then do something else entirely different? It just flabbergasted me coming up. Being pretty much honest my entire life and just don't seeing really the point of lying and then trying to have to keep track of lies and then try to be weasel out of things, snaky like. And it would kind of infuriate me. Once it was put like this, it just kind of cleared up a bunch of things but I still don't know why this happened. Well, I have some really kind of deep metaphysical speculation or things I could repeat, but I won't hear. Why a lot of people will say one thing but mean another, and then do something else entirely. But just put like that gave me a lot of added clarity about how a significant portion of people operate in the world, are used to anyway, hopefully. So another thing with this customer service apology, it's kind of a response of impotency or perceived impotency. By this I mean neither one can or wants to take action. So they just kind of want to, a lot of times, voice, whatever they want. And then the person calling into customer service or talking about customer service, it's like they can't do anything. So that's why they're calling and either asking for some kind of action or some kind of response taken. Well, sometimes though, when the customer service rep apologizes, then they can take action. But a lot of times, that's all they can do is apologize, or can sometimes conclude that the other person can't do anything and is impotent to do anything that's calling in. But that's sometimes not the case. Sometimes it is. So yeah, that's another big murky gray area. It's kind of like a groundless conclusion for limitation in that sense when that happens. I wonder if a solution to this, or maybe a different approach, might be to, I know some people really like apologies, but what if they led with action? Like, well, here's what we're going to do, or asking what the other person would like to have done, and then seeing what kind of compromise can be had. I'm not 100% sure on this, but bright sides of this is an opportunity to acknowledge and appreciate ourselves, because frustration is often a prompting for this. So a lot of times when I'm calling in to customer service and there's some kind of frustration involved, a lot of times this means that I feel I'm being underappreciated or undervalued. Sometimes I'm not even conscious that I'm reaching out for this external kind of value and validation, kind of in respect and honor too. Trying to get it from the outside instead of just taking a moment and offering that to myself, right? Because nobody's going to be able to give that level of value, validation, honor, and respect that can come from internally, right? Because no one knows us better than ourselves. What I did though is I tried this a couple times now. After they said, "Oh, I apologize," I said, "Well, I apologize for your apology." Or I said, "I'm sorry that you're sorry." And all of a sudden, it just like a light went on in them, and they're just like, "Oh," it just kind of got more real and sincere after that. Because I guess it just kind of, I don't know, disrupted kind of standard programming or scripting that goes along with this. Yeah, it was just the kind of superficial barrier that was there that they're used to dealing, not they, but the customer service rep is kind of on autopilot dealing with whatever they deal with all day long. And then something like this comes along, and then it just turned kind of more personal after I said that, right? It just become kind of more authentic conversation after that. So it's really kind of an interesting response I got when I said, "I apologize for your apology. I'm sorry that you're sorry." So I kind of included them instead of, the standard dynamic there. Well, I think that's going to do it for this brief talk on the psychology of customer service apologies. Oh, well, we got a guest here. Hey, how's it
I know you were
going?
on the tail end of leaving, but I was like, oh, I got to catch this topic. I really had
Cool.
to catch the tail end of it. I didn't mean to take any more time, but I won't take too much of your time. But
No,
your
perfect.
your title really sparked my interest
Cool.
because it with customer service becoming more intrusive in today's world, people's what's the way I can the patience is just not there as it once used to be because with companies like Spectrum, DirecTV, most of these telemarketers they go through quite a hassle. But when it's in retail as well, people expect it kind of like a subservient attitude from the people that work at these wholesale and retail places as well, and it becomes as if you have to adhere to all of their demands. But what you were mentioning, and I call it the tail end of what you were speaking about. I wanted you to elaborate more on how did you break the barrier of the traditional apology, and were you the recipient or were you the person that was giving giving it?
Yeah, what you said was so important too about the just kind of the general climate and environment of customer service and how the subservience that really stuck out for me. Yeah, they're almost expected to kind of, yeah, be subservient to and it's just like, well, what does that do to one's kind of empowerment and kind of the take action side? It's a really interesting dynamic, right? That's something else to explore on its own. But to your question of how did I break through that barrier, because I have a really regular meditation practice, have since 2012, a daily practice. And so a lot of times I'll just, part of the practice, I'll just sit and I'll drop in questions and I'll investigate this. You just drop a question in, and then the mind just kind of goes to work on it, and we'll come back with an answer a lot of times once the mind is actually kind of quiet and settled down. Um, and so it can go to work on that. And one thing that just came through was, I apologize for your apology. So that I was coming with, was under a lot of stress recently. Well, not a lot, but for me a lot, because most of my life is pretty smooth, right?
Hmm.
So when I was moving, I had some things. I won't go into details here, but a couple times, from two different people, really cool people too. It's just when they said they apologize, and it was just like, this is coming from standard autopilot, and it just seems like an okay way to operate, right? And we're all used to receiving a lot of apologies throughout the day. And again, like I said at the beginning, it's I'm not talking about sincere apologies here between friends where they're really needed, right? And sometimes put off, and then gotten later and they're really appreciated. I'm not talking about those. I'm just talking about the standard regurgitation of apologies. And so I
Hmm.
tried this, this insight of, I apologize for your apology. And it just kind of gave them a pause. And I guess they've never heard anything like that, because I hadn't either, and I don't know what happened or what, but it just kind of like diffused, and all this kind of posturing and surface level, way of we interacting in the world just kind of fell away. And then, I was able to share things more personally and real and authentically in a more kind way. And likewise too, the other two were able to do the same, and they were actually looking for kind of care and concern as well, from me. And so I was able to reciprocate. At least I felt I was anyway. So yeah,
Wow, that's really interesting psychology. Because if I were an angry customer and you were to say, I apologize for your apology, I'm not going to lie, it would throw me off tremendously. And then I would, of course, more than likely be curious as to what you would say following that, considering the context or perhaps the severity of the issue that I'm frustrated with. Because I think some people want to have their feelings, well, no, most people want to have
yeah,
their feelings validated, right? And
absolutely.
I feel as though you saying that would open up more dialogue for you to speak with them and to diffuse potential hostility.
Oh, it totally did. And for me, for whatever reason, maybe it's just a misperception on my part, but when I hear this, I'm sorry, or this, I apologize, it just doesn't feel really sincere to me, you know? And I guess some people aren't looking for sincerity, right? They just want to hear this apology, and that's great. If that works for them, I say go for it. That's great. But for me, it almost kind of just like, in a way, for me, that I'm so into authenticity and sincerity, it's almost like kicking somebody when they're down, if they don't really mean it, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, but yeah, so that's just, yeah. So I wonder, I can't really say everybody go out and try this, but if
Right.
you feel called to, if you're curious and you feel called to try it out, maybe you ought to, folks out there listening could consider this, I don't know. So like, I can't really advise it. I can't really advise against it. So it's whoever's call, use discernment.
Right. Of course. And I would only hope people don't try to say it in a sarcastic way because I can see how that would go south really
Oh yeah, and I was
fast.
totally borderline on that, because it's just kind of like a sarcastic response in general, but in a way, it's maybe it can be perceived as sarcasm to point out sarcasm in a way, or sarcasm to point out insincerity. Just kind of a brief wake up call. Now, I don't really support sarcasm, unless you're a teenager just experimenting with sarcasm, right?
Hmm.
Or a bad sitcom or something like that. And I was really challenged on this for a long time, and that's to this day, I still have trouble giving sincere compliments because I was at the point where I was so inverted that I was giving these underhanded compliments that were actually insults. That's how bad I was at one point. So,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so I'm still working on that too.
Well, the sad thing is that when you work in an environment full of people that are condescending a-holes, it kind
Hmm.
of it kind of makes it a much more difficult environment for you to, of
Oh
course,
my
excel
gosh,
in.
yes. You're not kidding me, and then the condescending thing that would really push my buttons for the longest time too. And again, the condescension is similar along these lines too. It's an emotional distancing, right? It's this perception that, oh, I'm better than so and so I have to distance myself so I don't have to feel what they're feeling, or I don't have to feel what I'm feeling when I'm condescending to somebody. That distance me from myself, from have to feel and go through these uncomfortable, stuff and face myself, right?
Hmm.
So that's the kind of psychology of condescension, I feel.
Yeah,
But
it's like reverse psychology times 10.
yeah, yeah, it's something. It's something else.
It truly is, but I think the things that I've learned when I was in customer service was
Hmm.
just I can't. I just need to work on my reaction when I hear it because, of course, condescension translates to being an a hole. So of course you can already perceive that right off the bat, and now it's the response that you give back to equal or greater. But I don't like to make it a passive aggressive competition to be who can be more condescending. So I just sometimes when I was given presented with condescension, I would just be very subtle in a way that wouldn't indicate that I was. I don't know. I was very subtle with my responses because I had to obviously choose my words wisely. So I would just I guess I would probably give them the same kind of energy back. So it was kind of like me mirroring that energy, but it helped because I kind of held my own for the time being, especially because I was over here on the phones and stuff like that, speaking to people over the phone. So because I didn't actually see these people in person, I mean I did when I was working in retail, but when I switched to on the phones and stuff like that, it gave me that much that a lot more leisure. But I think the important thing here is just to to find a way to combat that so that you can diffuse that and continue on with what it is that you have to do as far as to getting past that because you don't want to dwell on that because it only makes it even worse, and then of course it gives them more fuel when they see that you're defeated. They're like, oh yeah, I got you now. I got you now I get what I want and I've finally gotten over on you, so now you are less than me in intellect. Like, all right, okay, good for you. So yeah, it's just it helps to control your response. I've learned that at least. But I do want to say, Joshua, I believe this is the first time we've had a discussion, so I do want to say I appreciate having the chance to speak with you today. Definitely look forward to more conversations like this in the future. And if you see me on, definitely would love to have you on to converse more because I want to get to know you, man. But I do hope you take care, all right?
Cool. Tell me real quick. I can only read topics with.
It's Malcolm or Mac.
All right, Malcolm or Mac, thanks so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure talking. And to pick up on what you said there, very important thing, because this is where, I mean, just kind of look at it the spiritual side here. Kind of the viewpoint I'm looking at the most here now is that, you know, there might be some, how can I put this? We can't always control what happens to us in life, but where our kind of free will comes in, where we have actually choice, is how we view the situation and how we respond to it. So, very important. How are we framing this? How are we viewing this? You know, what kind of perceptions are evident when we're interacting with someone? And then how are we going to respond? Because that's where we have choice and say in the matter. We can't obviously control what people are going to say or do to us, but how are we going to view it and how are we going to respond? And so this teaching I heard that's helped me so much, especially when I can remember it, right, is to focus on our response, right? We can still listen to the other person, but instead of matching their energy, so what we usually tend to do is we tend to match the person's energy that we're interacting with, right? Because if it's someone condescending, then, kind of unconsciously we think, well, I have to kind of get in their mindset so I'll be able to relate to them or speak to them and maybe, interact with them and do what I want to do. But so we feel we have to kind of match where they're at to be able to interact with them, but that's not the case. We can listen to them, hear them, but then focus our energy and attention on how we're going to respond. What kind of energy and response are we going to bring to what they say? And it's an energetic game. It really is an energetic game. So it's matching the same intensity level of energy, but with the more wholesome, skillful, wise response of the energy that we want to bring forth for our benefit, for their benefit, and for the benefit of all beings everywhere. Ideally, right? I mean, obviously, we don't have to beat ourselves up when we fall short of this, but the power is in the response. And so, a lot of times when we're not focused on our response, then we're just caught up in, dirty energy underwear, is what another teacher calls it a lot of times. Exchanging dirty energy underwear with other people is one way to look at it. But another point that Mac brought up was using their type of energy, um, not against them, but this is actually one of these energetic laws. The first one is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But this other one, what Mac was speaking to, though, and I don't use this very much unless I kind of have to, where it won't, you can't really get through to the other person in your way. And some people that are mired in condescension and so mired on a healing journey that they don't even know they're underway of. Sometimes it is um, I guess, called for to use the same kind of energy. Um, so I guess the second law is do unto others what they do on what they would do, what they would do unto you. Now, the way I kind of, and this won't make sense for some people, and that's okay because there's other ways to do this, and I only do this kind of rarely. I don't even know if I want to give an example or not, but yeah, it's really I would have to go kind of on a case by case specific basis with this. It's kind of really delicate because that kind of approach, if you're good at it, then it can work really well. But if it's just something you're kind of experimenting with, I would not recommend that because it has a chance to backfire on you real quick, especially if you don't know what you're doing. It's kind of like playing with fire. But for those who know how to do that and do it skillfully, then it's allowed for. But the main first thing, do unto others as they would do unto you. That's the big one. I mean, that's where we're operating most of the time. And so, yeah, focusing on that response. And I guess with that, a lot of guessing here. I'm gonna end this and leave you all with the optimal and ideal energy and consciousness to the rest of your day, evening, afternoon, and night. Bye now.